I reported to Northpoint Lighthouse because my file told me to. I want you to understand that. I didn't go looking for the place. I didn't hear about it from a friend, didn't find it on a map, didn't stumble across it while driving the coast. I received a transfer notice, printed on county letterhead, stamped with a department code, addressed to my name and a unit number I never asked for. And the notice said to report to Northpoint Lighthouse for night shift 11 p.m. and to bring my badge. So I went, because when's in a system that has already demonstrated, it knows your name, your weight, your shift schedule, and your mother's phone number, tells you to be somewhere. You go. Not because you believe it's safe. Because you're afraid of what the file says about you if you don't. The lighthouse had already signed me in before I arrived. I need you to hear that clearly. I walked through the door of the keeper's office at 10:51 p.m. and the register on the desk, a cloth-bound logbook, county-issued, with my assignment printed on the cover, was open to that night's date, and my name was already written on the entry line. My full name, my arrival time, listed as 10:51, my mileage from the county line which I had not reported to anyone, and a note in handwriting that I recognized because it was mine that read, "Arrived with transfer file from Harrow, beacon dark, wind southwest 12 knots, beginning shift." I had not written that. I had not touched the register. I was still standing in the doorway with my jacket zipped and my car keys in my hand when I read those words in my own handwriting on a page that was already dry, as if the ink had been there for hours. During the night, the beacon turned on by itself. It had been decommissioned. The bulb housing had been disconnected from county power. The generator in the shed behind the tower was supposed to be dry and empty, and the lens room at the top of the stairs was supposed to be sealed. But at 1:14 a.m., the light came on, and it did not point out to sea. It pointed inland. The beam swept across the coastal road and the county access gate and the empty parking lot and the roofline of a maintenance shed a quarter-mile south. And then it kept rotating, and it crossed the hillside above the highway, where, if you followed the road far enough east, you would eventually reach the industrial corridor where the Harrow Municipal Records Annex sat at the end of a dead-end road. The light pointed toward Harrow. I am certain of that. I watched the beam from the base of the tower, and I traced its path against the landscape. And I knew, with a clarity that I cannot attribute to reason or evidence, that the lighthouse was not signaling the ocean. It was signaling the system. The same system that had counted me at the warehouse. The same system that had filed me at Harrow. The same Department of Civil Storage that does not appear in any county directory, and does not answer its phone, and has never, as far as I can determine, employed a single human being who will admit to working there. I understand now that Harrow was not the end of anything. It was intake. Northpoint is something else. And the register is not a record of what happens. It is the mechanism by which things are made to happen. I didn't know that when I arrived. I know it now, and I am telling you this because the register is still open, and the last entry on the page is dated 3 days from now, and it is in my handwriting, and it describes events that have not occurred yet, and I cannot stop reading it. Let me go back. Let me tell you how I got there, because the sequence matters. After Harrow, I had the transfer letter. I described that in my previous account. County postmark, no return name, unit number, and my name both on the address line, instructing me to report to Northpoint Lighthouse for night shift, Department of Civil Storage, supervisor to be assigned. The effective date was 10 days out. I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself. The letter was a bureaucratic error, a piece of automated mail generated by a system that had already demonstrated it was malfunctioning, and that the appropriate response was to ignore it and move on with my life. But here is what happened in the 10 days between receiving the letter and the report date. On day 3, I called the county employment office, the main line, the one listed on the website. I asked to speak to someone in the Department of Civil Storage. The woman who answered put me on hold. 2 minutes later, she came back and said there was no department by that name in the county system. I asked if she could check for Northpoint Lighthouse as a county property. She put me on hold again. When she returned, she said Northpoint Lighthouse was listed as a decommissioned navigational aid, county-owned, under maintenance jurisdiction of the Coastal Works Division, not staffed. I asked if there were any open positions associated with the property. She said no. I thanked her and hung up. On day 5, I received a second piece of mail. Same county postmark. Inside was a single sheet. Not a letter this time, but a form, a W-4. A tax withholding form, pre-printed with my name, my social security number, and an employer identification number I didn't recognize. The employer name field read, Dept. of Civil Store, Northpoint Division. The form was unsigned. A sticky note attached to the top read, in small type print, complete and bring to first shift. Filing required for payroll activation. Payroll activation. The system was offering to pay me. Or rather, the system was requiring paperwork in order to pay me, which is a different thing. It's the language of an employer that assumes you have already accepted the position and is now processing your onboarding. I had not accepted anything. I had not applied. I had not interviewed. But the W-4 was real, and the EIN was real. I checked it against the IRS database, and it returned a valid match for a registered entity called Civil Storage Operations, registered in the county 12 years ago, with no public filings since. On day 7, my bank account received a direct deposit. The amount was $612. The payer was listed as CIV Forgeries OPS. The memo line read, Advance, Ward M, Northpoint, Shift 1. $612. I stared at the transaction on my phone for a long time. That was almost exactly 1 week of overnight shifts at $14 an hour after estimated taxes. Something, had calculated a pay advance for a job I had not started and deposited it into an account I had never provided to anyone at the Department of Civil Storage. I should have returned it. I should have called the bank and flagged it as an unauthorized deposit and refused the money and treated the entire situation as fraud or error and walked away. I did not return it. I paid my electric bill. I bought groceries. I filled my gas tank. I had $40 left. And then it was day 10, and the report date had arrived, and I had spent the money, and I understood with a sick, heavy clarity that the system had purchased my compliance for $612, not by threatening me, not by forcing me, by paying me in advance, so that refusing to show up would mean I had taken money for work I hadn't done, which would make me a thief, which would give the system, or whatever human resources apparatus existed behind it, grounds to pursue me. The transaction wasn't generosity. It was a lien. The money was a collar, and I had put it on myself. So I drove to Northpoint. The lighthouse was 47 miles north of my apartment, up the coast highway, past the last commercial stretch of gas stations and bait shops, and then onto a 2-lane county road that wound through brown hills above the ocean. The road narrowed as it climbed. No streetlights. No guardrails for the last 2 miles. The fog came in about halfway up, not thick, but present. A gray filter that softened the headlights and made the road feel like it was being erased behind me as I drove. The county gate was at the end of Northpoint County Maintenance Road, a gravel turnoff marked with a small reflective sign that read Kanki Property, no public access. The gate was chain link, 6 feet tall, with a padlock. I got out of my car and looked at it. The transfer letter hadn't mentioned a gate code or a key. I was standing in the fog on a gravel road at 10:30 at night, wondering if this was the part where the absurdity of the situation would finally give me permission to turn around and go home. Then I noticed the padlock was open, not unlocked with a key. The shackle was pulled clear of the body, hanging loose, as if someone had opened it and left it that way. Recently, too, the metal where the shackle met the body was bright, unrusted, while the rest of the lock was corroded and weathered. I pushed the gate open. It moved easily, no resistance, no creak. I drove through and did not close it behind me. The gravel road ran another 1/4 mile along a headland, curving with the shape of the cliff, and ended in a small, paved lot, room for maybe 4 vehicles. The lot was empty. Beyond it, on a concrete pad at the edge of the headland, was Northpoint Lighthouse. It was smaller than I expected. Not the tall, candy-striped coastal towers you see in photographs. This was a squat, functional structure, maybe 45 feet tall, white-painted concrete that had gone gray and streaked with salt stains, with a black iron railing around the lamp room at the top. The glass panels of the lamp room were dark. Attached to the base of the tower was a single-story building. The keeper's office, or what used to be one. Flat roof, 2 windows facing the ocean, a steel door facing the parking lot. The door was painted red, but the paint had faded to a dull rust color that made it hard to tell where the paint ended and actual corrosion began. A county maintenance sign was bolted to the wall beside the door. Northpoint Lighthouse, County of Redacted, decommissioned, no trespassing, oft-forced personnel only. Behind the tower, maybe 30 feet from the base, there was a small shed, corrugated metal, padlocked, with a vent pipe on the roof. The generator shed. I could smell it from the parking lot. Diesel fuel. Old diesel fuel. The kind that develops a sharp, varnish-like odor after sitting in a tank too long. The wind was steady off the ocean. Southwest, maybe 12-15 knots. I could hear waves below the cliff. Not crashing, but working. The constant deep percussion of water against rock. Somewhere out in the fog, a buoy clanged at irregular intervals. The salt air was thick. It coated the inside of my nose and left a film on my lips. The concrete under my feet was damp. Everything was damp. The railing on the path to the keeper's door was rusted iron, and when I touched it, flakes of oxidation came off on my palm, orange-brown and gritty. I tried the keeper's door. It was unlocked. Not open, closed and latched, but the lock was disengaged. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The keeper's office was a single room, about 15 by 20 feet, with concrete walls, a low ceiling, and a linoleum floor that had buckled in places from moisture. There was a metal desk against the far wall, a wooden chair, a wall-mounted shelf with a few books and bystanders, and a portable electric heater that was not plugged in. A door in the left wall led to the base of the tower stairwell. A second door in the right wall was closed and unmarked. The room smelled like damp wool and old paper and the faint metallic tang of salt-corroded hardware. A single overhead light, a caged bulb on the ceiling, was on. I had not turned it on. There was no switch near the entrance. The light was simply on, as if it had been waiting. On the desk, centered and square, was the register. It was a cloth-bound ledger, larger than a standard notebook, maybe 10 by 14 inches, with a dark green cover that had swollen slightly from moisture exposure. The cover was stamped in gold lettering that had mostly faded. Northpoint Lighthouse, Keeper's Ravager, Department of Civil Storage, Property of County Name. Below that, in smaller text, Do Not Remove from Station. I opened it. The register was organized by date. Each page had columns: date, time, keeper on duty, Weither, sea state, be a constable, and a wide column on the right labeled Observations. The first entries were old, decades old. The paper at the front of the register was yellowed and brittle. The ink faded to brown. The handwriting was precise, the kind of careful penmanship that people used when record-keeping was a point of professional pride. The first entry was dated November 12, 1971. The keeper's name was Ellis Rourke. Nov 12, 1971, 23, Rourke, E. Clear, wind NW 8 KT, moderate swell, beacon operational, commenced night watch. Shipping lane quiet. No vessels observed. Lens cleaned and housing inspected at 01. All systems nominal. The entries continued in the same hand, night after night, for years. Rourke documented everything with a consistency that bordered on devotion. Weather, wind speed, wave height, beacon status, shipping traffic, maintenance tasks. Occasionally there were longer entries. A storm that damaged the lamp room glass. A fishing vessel in distress that Rourke reported via radio. A visit from a county inspector who noted repairs needed. The handwriting never changed. The tone never wavered. Rourke was a man who took his job seriously and recorded his world with steady, impersonal precision. Then the entries stopped. The last Rourke entry was dated March 8, 1989. Mar 8, 1989, 23 Rourke, E. Fog, wind SW 15 KT. Heavy swell, beacon operational. Night watch commenced. Fog thick from 030. Visibility less than 200 yards. Beacon at full power. Foghorn activated 0150. Received radio contact 240. Vessel identifying as MV Callista requesting bearing confirmation. Provided bearing. Vessel did not acknowledge. Repeated bearing at 0255. No response. Lost contact. And then, below that, in the same handwriting but with a pressure and slant that suggested the words were written faster, or with more force, ZO 320. Beacon has turned. Lens rotating inland. Manual override non-responsive. Foghorn continues without activation. I have not activated it since 0115. Someone is in the lamp room. I am at the desk. The stairs are above me. I can hear footsteps. Entry continues on next page. There was no next page entry from Rourke. The page that followed was blank. The page after that was blank. 32 years of blank pages in a register that had been kept faithfully every night from 1971 to 1989, and then nothing, until tonight's date. I turned the pages. Blank, blank, blank. For what felt like a long time, the paper whispering under my thumb, swollen and soft with salt moisture, until I reached a page near the middle of the register that was not blank. Tonight's date, the columns filled in. The handwriting was mine. Date tonight's date time, 2251 Keeper on duty, Ward Marcus D. Weather. Fog wind SW12 KTC state. Moderate beacons, dark observations. Arrived with transfer file from Harrow. Beacon dark. Wind southwest 12 knots. Beginning shift. That was the entry I described at the beginning. My name. My arrival time. Exact to the minute. My weather observation, which was accurate. The reference to Harrow, which only I would know. And the handwriting, which was mine. Not similar to mine. Not a careful imitation. Mine. The specific way I form a capital W, with the second peak slightly taller than the first. The way my lowercase d leans slightly left. The inconsistent spacing I leave between words when I'm writing quickly. Every detail was correct. It was my hand on the page, but I had not put it there. I stood in the keeper's office and looked at the register and felt something shift inside my chest. Not fear, exactly, but the specific sensation of understanding arriving too late. The same feeling I'd had at Harrow when the Caldex terminal displayed my badge number. The feeling of realizing that you are not discovering a problem. You are discovering that the problem discovered you first. I sat down in the wooden chair. It was cold. The whole room was cold. The portable heater was unplugged, and there was no other heat source, and the concrete walls radiated the chill of the ocean like a meat locker. I could feel the damp in the air settling on my skin, on my jacket, on the pages of the register. My breath didn't quite fog, but it was close. I looked at the entry again. Below my observation line, there were more lines, future lines. The next entry was timed at midnight. Ward M, fog thickening. Wind steady. Beacon remains dark. Commenced first inspection of tower. Stairwell clear. Lamp room sealed. Generator shed locked. Returned to office. No anomalies. And below that, ZO14T Ward M. Beacon activated. Cause unknown. Lens rotating inland. Unable to access lamp room. Door sealed from inside. Foghorn sounding. Have not activated foghorn. Reporting to register as required by Protocol 4 Aleph. Standing by. And below that, 0230. Ward M. Second party present in tower. Footsteps audible on stairwell descending from lamp room. Cannot identify. Radio receiving intermittent signal on channel 16. Not maritime traffic. Signal appears to originate inland. Register entry by keeper continues below. And then, in a different handwriting, not mine, not Rourke's, something older and more cramped, written in ink that was darker and still faintly damp. 0247, Rourke E. Keeper returned to duty. See supplemental log. File MW0002 accepted at Northpoint Station. Transfer from Harrow complete. Beacon confirms. Night watch continues. Rourke. The name from 1971. The keeper whose entries had stopped in 1989. His handwriting, or a version of it, the same precise letter forms but tighter, as if the hand that wrote them was under pressure, or had not written in a long time and was remembering how. MW0002. That was the file code from the Harrow transfer letter. My file. The system that had catalogued me at the warehouse had given me unit number 004-117. The system at Harrow had processed that number through its files, and now, at Northpoint, I had a new designation, MW002, Marcus Ward, second iteration, as if the version of me that had existed before Harrow was MW0001, and the version that arrived at Northpoint was an update, a revision, a second draft of a document the system was still editing. I closed the register. I sat in the cold office and listened to the wind and the buoy and the waves, and I tried to think clearly about what I was going to do. The register had described my night in advance. It had told me I would inspect the tower at midnight and find nothing wrong. It had told me the beacon would activate at 1:14. It had told me I would hear footsteps at 2:30. It had told me Rourke, or something using Rourke's name, would write in the register at 2:47. I could leave. I could walk out the door right now, get in my car, drive back down the maintenance road, and be home in an hour. The register said I would be here until morning. If I left now, the register would be wrong. And if the register could be wrong, then maybe the system could be wrong. And maybe being wrong would break something, would interrupt the processing, would make me useless to whatever apparatus was, moving me from building to building and file to file. Or the register was not predicting what I would do. It was prescribing it. The entry wasn't a forecast. It was an assignment, an itinerary. The register had told me what my shift would contain, and the system expected me to perform it, the way a warehouse expected inventory to be where the manifest said it would be. If I left, I wouldn't be proving the register wrong. I'd be going off manifest. I'd be misplaced again, the way I'd been misplaced when I left the warehouse early, the way the system had flagged me and escalated me, and eventually transferred me here. Leaving didn't break the system. Leaving just made the system try harder. I stayed. I need you to understand that the calculus was not bravery. It was the same math it had always been, just with different numbers. If I stayed and worked the shift, I would earn another night's pay from the direct deposit that had already started. If I left, I would be unemployed, $600 in debt to an employer I couldn't contact, flagged as misplaced by a system that had already demonstrated it could find me at a gas station card. Reader, the options were not stay or leave. The options were participate or be retrieved. I chose to participate because participation at least felt like it contained the illusion of volition. At 11:15, I explored the keeper's office more carefully. The shelf on the wall held 3 items: a county maintenance binder, a tide chart booklet dated 2019, and a handheld VHF radio in a charging cradle. The binder contained maintenance logs, inspection dates, repair orders, equipment inventories. Normal. The most recent entry was from 14 months ago, a routine inspection by a county coastal works crew. It noted that the beacon was decommissioned. The generator was drained and locked. The keeper's office was secured, and no further maintenance was scheduled. The inspector had signed his name and written, "Property stable, no issues. Recommend continued mothball status." Mothballed. That was the official status of Northpoint Lighthouse. Closed, preserved, not active. No keeper, no beacon, no night watch. And yet here I was, sitting in the office, reading a register that had signed me in, under the authority of a department that the county employment office said didn't exist. The tide chart was ordinary. The radio was dead. I pressed the power button and nothing happened. No charge, no static, no signal. I put it back in the cradle. The door on the right wall of the office, the one I hadn't opened, led to a small room that had probably been the keeper's quarters. A narrow cot with a bare mattress. A wooden footlocker at the base of the cot. A single window, shuttered from the outside, with salt rime on the glass. The room smelled like damp wool, stronger here than in the office, and underneath that, something else. A human smell, not unpleasant but distinct. The smell of a space that has been slept in recently. The mattress had an indentation. Not old. The foam or cotton or whatever filled it still held the shape of a body. Someone had lain on this cot within the last few days or weeks. Not years. Days. The footlocker was unlocked. Inside, I found a wool blanket, a flashlight with corroded batteries, a county-issue rain jacket in faded yellow, and a badge. A white plastic rectangle with a clip, identical in format to the badge I'd been given at the warehouse and at Harrow. This one read, Dept. Of Civil Storgy, Northpoint Division Rourke, E. Badge G, NP001. Active Ellis Rourke. Badge NP0001. Status active, the keeper whose entries had run from 1971 to 1989. The keeper who, according to the register, had written a log entry at 2:47 this morning tonight, in ink that was still damp. His badge was here, in a footlocker, in a room that smelled like someone had slept in it recently, with a status that read active on a lighthouse that had been decommissioned for over 30 years. I put the badge back. I closed the footlocker. I returned to the office. At 11:55, I opened the door to the tower stairwell. The stairs were iron, an open spiral, bolted to the interior wall of the tower, rising in a tight helix from the ground floor to the lamp room at the top. The stairwell was dark. The only light came from the keeper's office behind me, and a faint gray glow from the lamp room above, which I attributed to ambient light coming through the glass panels. The iron steps were rusted but solid. The railing was cold under my hand, the kind of cold that metal gets when it's been conducting ocean air for decades. A deep cold that feels like it will never warm no matter how long you hold on. The stairwell smelled like rust and salt, and the concrete walls had a slick, wet sheen. I climbed. The tower was 45 feet tall, and the stairs made approximately 6 full rotations from bottom to top. My footsteps rang on the iron treads, each step producing a clear metallic note that echoed up the cylinder of the tower and came back down slightly altered, slightly delayed, as if the tower were a throat and the sound was being swallowed and returned. I counted the steps out of habit, 63 from the ground floor to the lamp room landing. The lamp room door was a heavy steel hatch, horizontal, set into the floor of the lamp room platform. It had a wheel latch like a ship's hatch. I turned the wheel. It moved freely. No resistance, no rust in the mechanism, despite the condition of everything else in the tower. The hatch swung open. I pulled myself up into the lamp room. The lamp room was a circular space, maybe 10 feet across, enclosed by glass panels set in iron frames. The panels were dirty, streaked with salt, spotted with bird droppings, hazed with years of oxidation on the exterior surface. But through them I could see the fog and, below it, the dark suggestion of the ocean. The wind was audible up here, a steady pressure against the glass, and the panels vibrated faintly with each gust. In the center of the room stood the beacon apparatus, a large Fresnel lens, about 4 feet tall, mounted on a rotating pedestal. The lens was dark. The bulb housing behind it was empty. No bulb, no filament, no electrical connection that I could see. The pedestal was mechanical, designed to rotate the lens using a clockwork mechanism that was visible through an access panel on the base. The clockwork was still. The lens was cold. I touched the glass, and it was the temperature of the ocean air, maybe 45 degrees. And my fingerprint left a clear mark in the dust. Nothing wrong, nothing out of place. Exactly what the register had predicted. Lamp room sealed, no anomalies. I climbed back down. I returned to the office. I sat at the desk. The time was 12:11 a.m. I opened the register to confirm what I'd read. The midnight entry was there. My handwriting commenced first inspection of tower. Stairwell clear. Lamp room sealed. Generator shed locked. Returned to office. No anomalies. I had not checked the generator shed. The register said I had. The entry said, generator shed locked as part of my midnight inspection. But I had gone up the tower and come back down and sat at the desk without going outside. The register had recorded a version of my inspections that was more thorough than the one I had actually performed. I could go check the generator shed now and make the entry retroactively true, or I could leave it. A small discrepancy, a hairline crack between what the register said and what had actually happened. Maybe that crack mattered. Maybe it didn't. I went outside and checked the generator shed. The padlock was secure. The vent pipe was intact. I could smell diesel fuel through the corrugated wall. I went back inside and sat at the desk. Now the entry was true. I had made it true. Not because I believed the register needed to be accurate, but because the discomfort of the discrepancy, the feeling of the record saying one thing and reality saying another, was worse than the cold walk to the shed and back. I had performed an action in order to make an existing record correct, rather than recording an action I had already performed. The difference between those two things is the difference between being a keeper and being kept. I understood that. I understood it, and I did it anyway. At 12:40, I made coffee. There was no coffee maker in the keeper's office, but there was an electric kettle on the shelf that I hadn't noticed before. A small, dented stainless steel kettle with a frayed cord, and a jar of instant coffee beside it. I plugged the kettle in. It worked. The outlet worked. The keeper's office had power, which meant something in this building was connected to the grid or to the generator, despite the decommission report stating that all utilities had been disconnected. The coffee was old. The jar's lid was crusted and the granules had clumped into hard brown pebbles. But it dissolved in hot water and produced something that tasted like coffee the way a photocopy resembles a photograph. Close enough. I drank it and felt the warmth hit my stomach, and I sat at the desk and waited for 1:14, because I knew what was going to happen at 1:14. The register had told me, and I wanted to see if it was right. Not because I doubted it. I had stopped doubting the register when I found my handwriting on the page, but because I needed to witness the event with my own eyes in order to understand whether the register was recording the future or constructing it. At 1:14 a.m. the beacon activated. I didn't hear a switch. I didn't hear a motor. I didn't hear the clockwork mechanism in the lamp room engage. What I heard was the light itself, a deep, resonant hum that started in the walls of the tower and traveled down through the concrete foundation and into the floor of the keeper's office, a vibration I felt in the soles of my boots before I saw the light sweep past the window. Then the beam crossed the glass, a wide, slow arc of white light, brighter than anything the dirty Fresnel lens should have been able to produce, and it swept from the ocean side of the lighthouse, across the headland and toward the coast road and the hills beyond. Inland. I went outside. The beam was rotating, one full revolution every 8 or 10 seconds, and each time it passed over the landward side, it illuminated the gravel road, the county gate, the hillside, the fog. The light cut through the fog like something solid. I could see the beam's path, a visible column of illumination, particulate with moisture, extending inland for what must have been miles. On the seaward side, the beam was dimmer, diffused, almost perfunctory, as if the lens were only nominally acknowledging the ocean before swinging back to its real focus. The foghorn started at 1:16. A low, massive sound. Not a horn exactly, more a vibration, a pressure wave that I felt in my sternum and my sinuses. It came from somewhere below the lighthouse, from the cliff face or the rocks at the base of the headland. 2 seconds on, 8 seconds off. A pattern, a signal. But there was no foghorn mechanism on the lighthouse that I'd seen. No compressed air system, no diaphragm housing, no power connection. The decommission report had noted that the foghorn had been removed in 2004. And yet, I went back inside. I opened the register. The 1:14 entry was there, as I'd read it before. Beacon activated. Cause unknown. Lens rotating inland. Unable to access lamp room. Door sealed from inside. Foghorn sounding. Have not activated foghorn. Reporting to register as required by Protocol 4 Aleph. Standing by. I had not yet tried to access the lamp room. The entry said the door was sealed from inside. I needed to check. I entered the stairwell. The iron stairs rang under my feet. The beacon light was visible from inside the tower now. The lamp room above was no longer dark but blazing, a white-hot intensity that leaked through the edges of the hatch and made the upper portion of the stairwell glow like the inside of a furnace. I climbed. 63 steps. The light grew brighter with each rotation of the beam, pulsing as the lens turned, and the hum was louder here, resonating in the iron stairs and the railing so that every surface I touched vibrated. I reached the hatch. I tried the wheel. It would not turn. The mechanism that had moved freely an hour ago was now locked. Not rusted, not jammed, locked. I could feel the resistance of a bolt or a latch on the other side. Sealed from inside, exactly as the register had said. Someone, something, had locked the lamp-room hatch from above after I'd left. The light pulsed through the edges of the hatch. The hum filled the stairwell. I stood on the landing with my hand on the wheel, and I looked up at the bright seam where the hatch met the frame, and I tried to understand what was on the other side of that door, not what was generating the light. The Fresnel lens was generating the light. But what had turned it on, and what had locked the hatch, and what was operating the clockwork that rotated the lens? Inland. I did not force the hatch. I went back down. In the office, I sat at the desk. The register was open. I read the 2:30 entry again. ZO 2:30, Ward, M, second party present in tower. Footsteps audible on stairwell. Descending from lamp room. Cannot identify. Radio receiving intermittent signal on channel 16. Not maritime traffic. Signal appears to originate inland. Register entry by keeper continues below. That was 90 minutes from now. In 90 minutes, someone would be on the stairs. Coming down. From the lamp room that was sealed from inside. I sat and I waited and I listened to the beacon hum and the foghorn pulse and the wind against the glass and the buoys somewhere out in the fog. The coffee went cold. My hands were cold. The register was open on the desk in front of me and the future was written on the page, and I was waiting to perform it. At 1:45, the radio turned on. The handheld VHF in the charging cradle, the one I'd tested at 11:15, the one that was dead, no power, no charge, was now producing sound. Not static, not a voice, a tone. A single sustained tone, low-pitched, like the test signal broadcast stations use when checking emergency alert systems. It came out of the small speaker in a thin, steady stream, and the power light on the radio was not lit. The device appeared to be off, but it was transmitting sound. I picked it up. The tone continued. I pressed the channel selector. The tone cut out, replaced by a brief burst of static, and then a voice. Not a full transmission. A fragment. A man's voice, flat and procedural, mid-sentence, as if I'd tuned into a conversation already in progress. Confirm unit MW002, Northpoint Station, status pending. Beacon is active. Keeper register is open, awaiting final. Then static, then silence, then the tone again. I changed the channel. Static. I changed it again. Static. I returned to channel 16 and heard. Ward, Marcus D., Department of Civil Storage. File transfer from Harrow Annex. Active processing. Northpoint Keeper assignment pending confirmation. Beacon confirms. Please log. Static, silence, tone. The voice was not robotic. It was human. Tired, rote, the cadence of someone reading from a script or a form. The way a dispatcher reads incident numbers or a clerk reads invoice lines. It was the voice of a person doing a job. But the content was about me, my name, my department, my file transfer, my assignment. Someone, on a radio frequency that a dead handheld VHF should not have been receiving, was processing my paperwork out loud. I put the radio down. The tone continued from the speaker, steady and thin. I did not turn it off, because I could not determine how to turn off a device that was not on. At 2:15 I heard the footsteps. They came from above. From the stairwell. The iron treads amplified everything. Each step was a distinct metallic ring, clear and measured, descending. Not fast, not slow. The pace of someone coming down stairs they knew well, in a building they were familiar with, on a shift they had performed many times. The footsteps were confident. That was the worst thing about them. They were not the hesitant, groping sounds of someone lost in the dark. They were the sounds of someone who belonged there. I stood up from the desk. The stairwell door was 6 feet to my left. It was open. I had left it open after my last climb to the lamp room. Through the doorway, I could see the first few steps of the iron spiral, rising into the orange glow of the beacon light. The footsteps were above that visible section, still descending, still measured. I counted the rings, 47, 48, 49, getting closer to the visible portion of the stairs. I watched the doorway. The footsteps continued. 55, 56. They were close now. Close enough that whoever was making them should have been visible on the stairs. I could see the third step, the fourth step, the fifth step. The footsteps rang on metal above the fifth step. Nothing appeared. The sound continued. 60, 61, 62, 63. The bottom. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairwell. I heard them on the concrete floor, at the base of the tower, the sound changing from iron ring to flat concrete tap. And then they continued, through the doorway, into the office, past me. I felt no presence, no cold spot, no displacement of air, no breath, no shadow. But I heard the footsteps cross the concrete floor of the keeper's office, 6 or 7 paces, and stop at the desk. At the register, I heard the chair creak, the wooden chair I had been sitting in moments ago, the creak of weight settling into wood and old joints. And then a sound I recognized instantly, the sound of a page turning, the soft, damp whisper of swollen paper being lifted and laid flat, and then silence. A silence that had the quality of attention. The silence of someone reading. I looked at the register. It was open on the desk, as I had left it. The pages had not moved, but the pen, a ballpoint pen that had been lying parallel to the register's spine, was now perpendicular. It had been moved. Not dramatically, just rotated 90 degrees. Then the pen moved. I watched it. It didn't levitate. It didn't float. It rolled. A small, deliberate roll, maybe a quarter inch, and then it stopped. And then it was moving across the page. I could not see a hand holding it. But the pen was moving with the specific, practiced motion of handwriting, the tip tracing lines on the paper, and I could hear the faint scratch of ballpoint on damp paper, and I could see ink appearing on the page. The entry at 2:47, the one I had already read, the one in Rourke's handwriting. 0247, Rourke, E. Keeper returned to duty. See supplemental log. File MW0002 accepted at Northpoint Station. Transfer from Harrow complete. Beacon confirms. Night watch continues. I watched the pen write each word. The handwriting was precise, careful. The pen moved steadily, without hesitation, as if the words were being copied from a source rather than composed. When the entry was complete, the pen lifted from the page, rolled back to its original position parallel to the spine, and was still. The chair creaked again. Footsteps crossed the floor. Concrete, flat, measured. They entered the stairwell. They began to climb. 63 steps ascending, each one a clear iron ring growing fainter as they rose. At the top, I heard the wheel latch turn. The hatch opened and closed. The footsteps stopped. I was alone again. I think I was alone. The distinction had started to feel academic. I went to the desk. The entry was there, fresh, the ink still wet. Rourke's handwriting. I touched the page next to the entry, not on the words themselves, and the paper was warm. Not room temperature. Warm, the way a page feels when someone's wrist has been resting on it. Below Rourke's entry, there was a new line, one I had not seen when I'd read the register earlier. It was in my handwriting, the same hand as the original sign-in entry, the same hand as all the future entries that had been waiting for me when I arrived. It read, 03/5, Ward M. Keeper Rourke confirmed present. Register entry observed by Ward. Ward remains at desk. Beacon continues inland rotation. Recommend Ward complete keeper's log for remainder of shift. See Protocol 4 Aleph, Section 3. Continuity of record. Continuity of record. The register was asking me to write in it. Not in those words. It was framed as a recommendation, the way a supervisor's note in a shift report might read. But the meaning was clear. The register contained entries in my handwriting that I had not written. Those entries described events that were happening. If I began writing in the register myself, actually writing, with my own hand, of my own will, then there would be no difference between the entries the register had generated and the entries I had created. My handwriting and the register's handwriting would be the same. I would become the author of my own file. That was the mistake. I can see it now. The register needed me to write in it voluntarily. Everything up to this point had been generated. My sign-in entry, the future entries, the observations, the weather notes, they were in my handwriting, but they were not by my hand. The register had simulated me. It had forged my contribution. But a forged entry and a genuine entry are different things, even if they look identical, because a genuine entry carries consent. If I picked up the pen and wrote in the register, I would be consenting. I would be agreeing that I was the keeper on duty. I would be confirming that this was my register, my shift, my station. I picked up the pen. I did it because the entry told me to, and because every entry that had told me something so far had been accurate, and because Protocol 4 Aleph sounded official and procedural and the kind of thing that exists in a binder somewhere in a county office. And because I was tired and cold, and the beacon was humming, and the foghorn was pulsing, and I had been awake for 19 hours, and the coffee was gone, and my hand was stiff from the cold, and the pen was warm from whatever had just been holding it, I wrote, 0322 Ward M, Keeper on duty. Beacon active, inland rotation. Foghorn active. Wind SW steady. Register current. Continuing night watch. I wrote it carefully. I used my normal handwriting. I noted the time, the conditions, the status. A keeper's entry. A log line. The kind of thing Ellis Rourke had written 6,000 times between 1971 and 1989. The moment I lifted the pen from the page, the register turned its own page. Not the wind, not a draft. The page turned the way a hand turns a page. Lifted from the lower right corner, carried over the spine, and laid flat on the left side. Under the turned page, on the new right-hand page, there was a form. Not a log entry, a printed form, on register paper, as if it had been bound into the book at the time of manufacture. It was a county form, the kind with pre-printed fields and boxes. The header read, Department of Civil Staatsstreich, Northpoint Lighthouse Keeper Assignment Confirmation of Duty File Code. MW0002. Below the header were fields. Name Ward Marcus D. Previous assignment. Harrow Municipal Records Annex Transfer Authorization. Caldex System Automated Date of Assignment. Tonight's date Keeperstick. Active. Confirmed by Previous. Keeper Rourke Ellis J. NP0001. At active concurrence notes. Has provided voluntary register for entry at a 322. Continuity of record established. Keeper assignment confirmed per Protocol 4 Aleph, Section 3. MW0001 remains archived at Harrow Annex. MW002 is the current active file for Ward Marcus D. at Northpoint Station. At the bottom of the form, there was a signature line. It was already signed. My signature. The same hand, the same pressure, the same slight upward slope I always give the final letter of my last name. Signed and dated with tonight's date. I had not signed it, but I had written in the register. I had picked up the pen, and I had made an entry in my own handwriting of my own volition, and the form treated that as confirmation. The register entry was the signature. The act of writing was the act of consent. I had signed my own assignment form by doing the thing every keeper is supposed to do, keeping the log. MW0001 remains archived at Harrow Annex. MW0002 is the current active file. There were two of me in the system. The version that had been processed at Harrow, Unit 0417, the misplaced warehouse stock, the file that had been transferred, was MW0001, and it was archived, stored, filed away in whatever the Department of Civil Storage kept at Harrow. And the version of me that was sitting in this chair, in this lighthouse, holding this pen, that was MW0002. A new file, a current file, active at Northpoint. I was not the same person who had arrived at Harrow. The system had not transferred me. It had versioned me. MW0001 had been closed out, filed, stored. MW002 had been opened, assigned, activated. The me that existed now was a continuation, not a transfer. The way a document is not moved when you open it on a new computer, but copied, and the original remains where it was. I closed the register. I put the pen down. I sat in the cold office and listened to the beacon hum and the foghorn pulse, and I thought about the footlocker in the keeper's quarters with Rourke's badge, NP0001, status active, and the entry in the register, keeper returned to duty. Rourke had been here since 1971. He had been a version in this system for over 50 years. Active, concurrent, still on shift, still climbing the stairs, still writing in the register. And now I was here too, NP0002, or MW0002, or whatever the system decided to call me next. The beacon turned off at 5:10 a.m., no sound, no mechanical wind down. The hum just stopped, and the light stopped, and the lamp room went dark again. The foghorn continued for another 6 minutes, and then it stopped too. The wind was still blowing. The buoy was still clanging. The ocean was still working against the rocks. But the lighthouse was quiet. Quiet in a way that felt like completion. Like the end of a program that had run its full cycle. I opened the register one more time. The page after the assignment form had a single entry. Not in my handwriting. Not in Rourke's. In type. Printed text. Somehow present on a page in a hand-bound ledger, as if it had been typeset into the paper at the time of binding. MW0002, Northpoint Lighthouse, Night Keeperst. Active shift 1 of blank, complete next shift. Tomorrow's date, 23 Keeper Rourke. Concurrence. Active beacon, confirmed conver. Kronken Protol 4LF. In effect note, MW0002 has demonstrated voluntary participation. Recommend continued assignment. File remains open. Transfer to next site deferred pending keeper integration review. Supplemental. Department of Civil Storage records indicate the following active Northpoint files. NP0001 Rourke Ellis J. 1971 Gro 02 blank blank pending Mebio 001 Ward Marcus D. Harrow. Archive Mebio Gro 2 Ward Marcus D. Northpoint. Active see also. Hack Victor J. File status. Transferred destination. Pending assignment see also. Cole, Miriam A. File status. Reclassed destination. Redacted Victor Hale, Miriam Cole. The names from the Harrow files. The people, or the files of people, who had been processed through the records annex before me. They were still in the system. Still being moved. Still being assigned and transferred and reclassified. And below my entry, there was NP0002, blank name, blank date, pending, the next keeper, the next version. Someone who hadn't arrived yet, but whose file was already open, waiting, the way mine had been waiting when I pulled up to the county gate 4 hours ago. I left Northpoint at 6:30 a.m. The fog was burning off. The ocean was gray and flat, and the headland was wet with dew, and the gravel crunched under my tires, and the county gate was still open, and the maintenance road took me back to the highway, and the highway took me south, and I drove with the windows down, because I needed the cold air to prove I was still in a body, still in a car, still moving through a world that existed outside of the register. I went home. I showered. I sat at my kitchen table. On the table was the transfer letter from Harrow, the W-4 form, the pallet tag from the warehouse, Marla Voss's memo, and now, in my jacket pocket, a new piece of paper. I had torn it from the register, the assignment confirmation form. MW0002, my signature that I hadn't signed, my handwriting that I had provided voluntarily. The form that said I was the current active file for Ward, Marcus D. at Northpoint Station. I should not have taken it. The register cover said, "Do not remove from station." But I needed it. I needed something physical. Something I could hold and read in daylight. Something that would confirm that the night had happened, and that the system was real, and that I was not losing my mind in the way that tired, poor, desperate men sometimes lose their minds when they work alone in empty buildings for too long. I looked at my bank account. The $612 was still there, minus what I'd spent. I looked at the assignment form. Next shift, tomorrow, 11 p.m. I looked at the note at the bottom. Recommend continued assignment. I checked my email. There was a new message, no sender name. The subject line was a file code. MW0002 Northpoint active. The body of the email contained a single line. Shift 2 begins tomorrow at 23 o'clock. Please bring register page to station for refiling. Thank you for your cooperation. Thank you for your cooperation. The same words the Caldex system had used, the same politeness, the same assumption that I would comply. I have not decided if I will go back tomorrow night. That is not